Hello and welcome to the Office Newb blog. My name is Kyle Pugh. Now during this little video session, I want to introduce you to a very powerful function built into Microsoft Excel called Offset. Now I've put a course out on advanced Excel functions, specifically working with the index and match functions. Inside of that course, I've got an exercise that goes through and dynamically allows you to sum up a range of data. Take a look. So open in front of you, I've got an example file. In this file, I'm going to make it available to you. It's going to be found down at the bottom of this blog post. Feel free to download it. You can even follow along with me, or even just watch the video and then later apply the concepts and skills that you'll master here. Now, inside of this exercise file, this is a part of the Advanced Excel Functions course that I offer using index and match. I've got a simple little sales table. I've got a column of sales individuals and their weekly sales amounts. Now, the exercise inside the course will take you through building this calculation right here. And many of you have already done that if you participated in the course. So it's actually a pretty simple calculation and pretty simple function. Here, if I click into cell I3, you can see that we're using the sum function. And within there, it's not just a standard range that we're summing up, but it's going to become dynamic based on an index function. And that index function references this right here, this number, tells it essentially which column we should be summing up. Now, once again, many of you have completed that exercise as you've gone through the course. What I want to do here is I want to build upon this idea of completing this worksheet here, creating it perhaps a little more interactive and making it more interactive for the users of the spreadsheet. So I've introduced a chart. Now, what I'd like to have happen here is as a user interacts with these little buttons to be able to change the week that they want to sum up based on that sum and index function, I also want to update this chart, this nice little pie chart. Right now we're looking at week 1 data because currently we're looking at week 1. We're summing up the week 1 data and we've even highlighted the week 1 data here. So now as I toggle through the buttons, say I go to week 2, we're now summing up week 2. We've highlighted week 2. And in the chart, we're now looking at the week 2 data. Again, as you can see, a little more interactive elements dropping in this chart and tying the chart to the specific range that we want to sum up that the user is currently looking at. Now, in order to do this, and perhaps there's multiple ways to do it inside of Excel, what we're going to see here is using the offset function. Now, the dynamic sum completed worksheet, this is already done for you. You can take a look at it, you can dissect it, break it apart. You can see what we're actually going to do here. Now, we're going to build it ourselves. And in order to do that, we are going to go to the dynamic sum with chart worksheet. On this worksheet, you're going to see the same thing. It's got the same little table. It's got the nice little spinner wheels, and it's going to go through and sum up whatever week you'd like to see there. But you'll notice as I'm toggling through those, it is not updating the week. That's what you're going to accomplish. That's what I'm going to discuss here. And you're going to do this by using the offset function. Now, before we get in there and start to build this interactive chart using the offset function, let's first get a solid understanding of what the offset function is, what it's all about, how do you work with it, what does it actually do for you, and how is it going to help us make this chart more dynamic. So take a look. I'm going to go over to the offset worksheet, and I've set up the same little table, same one we were just looking at. Salespeople there on the left, their weekly amounts as you travel to the right within this table. Now down below, I've got 3 little cells, nice little labeled cells there, that we're going to build a few offset functions. And this is going to give us a solid understanding of what offset's all about, and then we'll go apply it to that chart. So I'm going to hop down here into C9, and we're going to talk about just what offset is. So I'm going to bring in the offset function. I'm going to say equals offset, and I'm going to open up a parentheses. Now you'll notice that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 arguments, 5 pieces of information that we could provide to the offset function in order for it to do its job. Now before we get into each of those arguments, what does the offset function do? Well, equals offset, open parentheses. I'm going to go click on the little FX button up here at the top. This will open up my argument window. Let's see, that looks good right there. So it's got those 5 arguments in there. What does the offset function do? Well, the offset function returns a reference to a range that is a given number of rows and columns from a given reference. All right, so what does that actually mean? Well, let's look at this table. We got this, again, this table from the B column to the F column, from row 2 to row 7, right, throughout B to F. Now, what we can do with the offset is I could say, starting from this point, starting from cell B2, I'll make that my reference. Okay? That's your starting point. That's your reference point for your offset function. Now, starting from that point, we can tell Excel that we want to offset so many rows. I want to move so many rows. Maybe I want to move down so many rows from that target cell or that reference point. And how many columns do you want to move? So I could be moving to the right from that reference point. Now that can take me anywhere within this table. I can tell it, well, I want to move down 2 cells. So it'll take me down to K done. And I want to move over, let's say 2. I want to move over 2. So that'll take me to the 6900. Take a look. So I've got B2 as my reference point. That's the starting point for the offset. Now I'll tell it just 2 rows, 2 columns, and I'm going to leave the height and width empty. We'll talk about those here in a moment. They are optional. You'll notice that they're not bold like the other 3 are. That just denotes that those arguments are optional within this function. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, and let's see what we get. 6900. So from that point, we offset 2 rows down. That took us to K done. And then 1, 2 cells to the right, 6900. Let's jump in there and let's just try changing it again. Let's say I just want to see what's 2 rows down. So maybe I won't move any columns. I'll just say from B2, take me 2 rows down and stop. Don't go anywhere in the columns. I'm going to hit my enter key, and there's K done. That's your offset. At a simple example, you're just telling it from a reference point, a starting point, move so many rows and so many columns, and or so many columns. That's it. It's a big grid of data. You want to navigate it based on a starting point, a reference point within that range of data. Now let's take it a step further. I got cell C10. Now you might think, well, what am I going to use that for? Well, there's lots of different reasons to use the offset function. And what I'm going to show you here is one. Okay, just one method. We're going to take a look at a couple other ones. Now, when I used it the first time, I just said from the starting point, go 2 rows down, 0 columns, give me whatever's there. In this case, K done. Boop, brought it up for you. Now, that's great. I can see what's inside of that cell. Maybe you want to know what that cell actually is. Well, I started someplace. Where did I go to when I offset 2 rows and 2 columns, or only 2 rows? What cell did I land on? That's what we're going to find out here. We're going to get the cell's address. All right, so I'm going to bring in another function. It's called cell. Equals cell, open parentheses. I'm going to hit the little FX. All right, 2 things that the cell function wants to know. First thing it wants to know is, well, what do you want to know about the cell? They call it info type. Now here, inside of quotes, I'm going to put an address. I want to know the address of a cell. Now it wants to know, well, what cell do you want to know? Well, I could go click on a cell and just give it that address. For example, if I go click on 7,425 and I hit OK, it'll give me that address. Right? C column, C5, that's the cell. Well, let's get rid of the C5. I don't want to just click on a cell someplace. What I'm going to do here is in the reference, I'm going to drop in the offset. So I'm going to bring in the offset function. Let's go click on offset up here. So it wants that starting point, right? There's my starting point inside my data. And now it wants to know how many rows, how many columns do you want to move? Well, let's just go 2 rows down and let's do 4 columns. We're going to move over 4 columns. 2 rows down, 4 columns to the right. And I'll hit OK. All right, it's just telling me I didn't close my extra parentheses there. I'm going to accept the correction. Yes. Look at that, F4. So from this point, 1, 2 cells down, that's row 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. I got F4. So by nesting the offset function within cell, I can offset so many rows, so many columns, and I can figure out what cell I actually landed on. Give me that address back. Now that's great because you can take that and you can nest it into other functions that need a cell address. What do you think of that? All right, let's take it a step further. Next one down, this is talking all about sum, or excuse me, talking about offset. Here, we're going to combine offset with the sum function. Take a look. So I'm going to go into C11 equals sum. I'm going to bring in the sum function because I want to sum something up. Well, you know what? I'm not sure what it is that I want to sum up just yet. So here, I'm going to bring in the offset function. Let's go hit the little FX button. Here's my offset. So once again, it's got a starting point wherever you're going to start at within your data. It wants to know how many rows and how many columns to move. Well, here, once again, I want to sum up something. Let's say I want to sum up week 2. I want to sum up week 2's data. So I'm going to say I want to move from that location, 2 columns, 2 columns, and I want to move 1 row. So from this point, 1 row down, 2 columns to the right. That'll land me right on the beginning of week 2's data. Now, I want to sum up all the week 2's data. Well, this is where a height and a width potentially come into play. I'm going to give it a height. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cells. So height's going to become 5. I need 5 cells within that area. From this point, 2 cells over, 1 cell down. Now give me a height of 5 cells. I'm not going to do any width. Okay? Don't need it. It's optional. I'm only going to do 1 column, so that's all I'm going to get here. And if I go ahead and OK. Now, once again, I didn't close my parentheses, so I'm going to go ahead and say yes to accept it. And there's my sum. So 1 row down, 2 columns to the right, grabbing this data right here with the offset function and putting that into the sum. So I can see here I got a sum of 42,555, 42,555. Very neat, dynamic. It's not just a literal range, but you're using the offset to find the data. Now, that's a little bit of information about just what the offset function is, how you work with it, what the different arguments are. Now, let's apply that right there, just a little bit of knowledge that we have of it so far, back into our scenario and create a more dynamic worksheet utilizing the chart. So, let's hop over to the dynamic sum with the chart. All right, now this is going to go through a couple of steps. We are going to use the offset. But we need some way for this chart right here, you can see if I select it, that it's already picking up on week 1. Okay? But what I want to do is based on the user's input over here, what week they choose, we need that week to get populated inside of this chart. We essentially need to move this right here, this little red box and this blue outline, we need to move it over to week 4. Or if I go to week 3, we need to move it over to week 3. Then we're offset. We have a starting position. How many rows, how many columns do you want to move? And what's your height going to look like? All right, let's try this out. So in order to do this, we're going to use a name range. We're going to associate the name range with the offset function. And that's going to figure out where it should move to. And then we're going to associate that with the chart. All right, ready for this? So we're going to create a name range. Click someplace empty. Doesn't matter where I'm at. I just want to make sure I don't have the chart selected. You can't create name ranges with the chart selected. I'm then going to go to Formulas to my Name Manager. All right. Now I've got a couple of them in there already. These are the ones that work back here on the dynamic sum completed worksheet. I need to create a new one. So I'm going to go ahead and create one. Let's call this sales. Well, actually, let's call it, what's going to do it start with the data. So we're going to say weekly data. And I'm going to put a 2 on there because I've already got one called weekly data. That was from the earlier one. All right, let's change its scope. Let's just put it on the dynamic sum with chart. That way it's only referencing within this worksheet. It won't work anywhere else. All right, now I need to tell it what it refers to. And this is where you're going to use the offset command. Let's move that window a little bit. All right, so for ours, it's going to be equal to the offset command. Now, unfortunately, utilizing this little window here, it doesn't give you a whole lot of help as far as the arguments are concerned. So you're going to have to kind of remember what those are, maybe even write them down someplace so you can jump back in here and start to use it. But you might recall that the first argument of the offset was the reference point, the starting point. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the B2 cell. That's where I want to start, comma. So now it wants to know how many rows it should move. Well, from that point, we just want to move down 1 cell. So I'm going to tell comma 1, comma. Now it wants to know how many columns. This is the tricky one. So columns really dictate the weekly data. You know, users are going to be pushing buttons over here, which changes the number, which updates the calculation here, and it tells them which week they should be summing up. Well, then, you know what? Rather than putting a hard number in there, like say 2, because that would always sum up week 2 data, or grab week 2 data, I'm going to grab the I2 cell, the one that the user is actually changing. That will then tell the offset which column to move to. Then I'm going to go comma. Now it wants to know how many rows it should grab. Well, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 salespeople. So I'm going to put a comma in there. That'll be the height. How many rows do you want from this offset? Comma. I'm not going to do any columns. I'm not going to tell it to increase the width of the offset. So you know what? Actually, I can get rid of that comma and I could just close the parentheses there. That's it. All right, we got a bit going on in there, and again, unfortunately, we can't. There's not a whole lot of help, so we just have to kind of remember the arguments in there. Again, write them down. You know, put them on a piece of paper in front of you, or put them up on the screen someplace, just so you know what the arguments are. But remember, offset. You have the reference, how many rows, how many columns, what's the height, so how many rows do you want, and what's the width, how many columns do you potentially want. All right, and that's it. I'll hit OK. There's my new one, weekly data 2. It's got the offset in there that it's referencing. That looks good. And I'm going to go ahead and close. All right, so we've now got the name range that we now want to associate with the chart. So I'm going to select my chart. I'm going to go up to my design tab for my chart tools design tab, and I'm going to go into select data. Now inside my select data window, I'm looking at week 1. It always looks at week 1. I want to change that. So I'm going to select week 1. I'm going to go to edit. All right, series values. Right now, our chart is getting its series from C3 to C7. That's the week 1 data. Well, instead of that, let's get rid of the C3 to C7. This should be looking at weekly data 2. That's the name range that we just created. I'm going to hit OK. All right, you see my chart already changed in the background. I'm going to hit OK again. All right, let's look at this. So currently we got 3 up here. So the blue one, which is H. James, is 8,500. And if I look at week 3, H. James is 8,500. Let's see, K. Dunn, 8,500. L. Carey, 9910, 9910, looking good. If I minus this down to week 2, we're now looking at week 2 data. There's week 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. We've now created a much more dynamic chart utilizing the offset to populate the data source. just like that. Now, here's a little homework assignment for you, and I want you to share this in the comments. Whatever. Let us know how it went for you, how you did it. Even capture a screenshot. You can go into the post here within this blog, and down at the bottom you can submit a comment. But I want you to be able to update the week one, the chart title. And you'll find that by going into select data for the chart. Inside of there, you can select week one, edit that one just like we did earlier. And here you'll find the series name. So I want you to be able to update that as well so that it will display week 2 if a user picks a 2 over here. It'll display week 4 if a user toggles to the 4 value. So I really want to make this as intuitive as possible, as interactive as possible, and update not just the series, but update the title as well. So think about how you could use name ranges and the offset function to do that right there. Once again, make sure you download this file. There's a link down at the bottom of this blog post, and let us know how it goes for you. So thanks so much for participating in the courses that I offer. Hopefully you found some value within them, and you found some value right here utilizing Excel's offset function. Thanks a lot.